You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Welcome back to Win the Day. If this is your first time here, we sit down with some of the world's true change makers to give you all the tips, tools, and strategies to win the day every day. The quote for this episode comes from hockey superstar Wayne Gretzky and says, "Skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been." And that quote has been a guiding star for our guests today, as you'll see shortly. Joining me in our Los Angeles studio is venture capital legend Brett Thomas. Now, Brett is known for sourcing amazing deals and is the visionary behind CAVU Venture Partners, who have been crushing it in the consumer packaged goods space. And when I say crushing it, here are some of the brands he's been invested in: Bulletproof, Vital Proteins, Thrive Market, Beyond Meat, and so many more. They're also involved with some of my personal favorites, companies like Once Upon a Farm. Anyone who has kids and uses those pouches and has a basic level of nutrition knowledge knows that these things are generally pretty bad for you. But Once Upon a Farm is best in category by far. Kettle and Fire Bone Broth and Good Culture Cottage Cheese is another favorite of mine too. But Brett's not doing it all alone. In fact, he's assembled an all-star team of industry experts at CAVU, most notably his co-founder Rohan Oza, who is a renowned brand builder, and together they provide unparalleled and hands-on value to their amazing portfolio brands. Now, when they launched their first fund, Brett and Rohan raised more than $150 million in under 6 months. There was that much interest in what these guys were doing. And prior to CAVU, Brett was the founder of Thematic Capital Partners. And before entering into the consumer investing space, he worked at a New York-based hedge fund with over $9 billion in assets under management. In case you're not impressed enough, he was a Division I student athlete, was elected to Boston College's prestigious 40 under 40 list, and was recognized by Forbes magazine as one of the top deal makers and influencers in the consumer space. In this interview, we're going to talk about what companies excite Brett the most today, his criteria when deciding what to invest in, the power of a good brand and how to create one, and how to turn your business into a household name. Before we begin, remember that the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So if there's a friend or loved one who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day, share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Brett Thomas. Brett, great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Great to see you, and thanks for having me, James.
Well, I'm so excited to dive into all the amazing things that you've done and achieved in your career. To kick things off, can you take us right back to your younger days? Is there a memory or story that you recall that's so vivid for you today that personifies and summarizes what life was like for you growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest. In Cleveland, Ohio, in a suburb outside. Typical, middle-class family. I think growing up in the Midwest with Midwest values, as they always say, and being grounded and appreciating kind of everything you have was really instrumental for me in terms of as I went through life and, went through challenges of either success, but more importantly, failure, which really able to help prepare me for those moments going forward.
Yeah, how you can bounce back when failure inevitably hits. What career paths were you naturally gravitating towards when you were young?
I had no idea. I was a very good athlete when I was younger. I always thought maybe I could be a professional, whatever. And I played tennis in college, but I found myself in college not knowing what I wanted to be when I grew up, and that's okay, right? I mean,
should give people a lot of confidence.
Yes, I mean, I didn't fully figure out what my passion was, and I started CAVU. I think I was 34 years old, so it took me the first 30-something odd years of my life to figure that out. But, so I decided to major in finance because I thought it was the most practical. I'd learned some skill sets that I guess could be applied in a lot of other various career paths as a good foundation. So that it took me a moment to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up.
And that 5 years you spent in New York working for the hedge fund, what did an average day look like? How crazy was that lifestyle? And what did you feel like was missing from you personally?
Oh, wow. It was baptism by fire. I don't know. I use the analogy. Have you ever been into a dojo? And how much pain can you take? That was how I would describe it. And it's one of those experiences where, in the office, crack of dawn, you're working till late. But then you're young and you're in New York City and, you're out socially and staying out late. And so it was less sleep. And it's funny, ironic today, it's like, now the studies show you need sleep. So how in the heck people were able to operate like that back in the days? But it was tough. And I also use the analogy of, you're in high school and you probably had a teacher that was really, really hard on you because, and you didn't realize at the time, but they saw potential in you. And so they pushed you harder and you thought they were the meanest person in the world and the bane of your existence because why are they being so hard on me? And why is this so hard and challenging? But then 10, 15, 20 years later, you sit back and you go, oh, wow, like that person really was instrumental in helping me and saw something in me maybe that I didn't even see it myself. And other students. That's kind of how I equate the hedge fund world is. It was a very hard experience. It shaped me in many ways. And I probably didn't enjoy it as much when I was going through it. But as I sit back now and managing people and a team and investments and being a fiduciary of capital, I really appreciate those learnings and how hard it actually was.
So even though it took a few years off your life at the time, it's also taught you a lot about how far out of your comfort zone and what boundaries existed for you.
100%. And I think I was unhealthy when I was working in a hedge fund. I was overweight. I was skinny fat, as they call it. It was very unhealthy, not a lot of sleep. Eating habits weren't great. It was really hard on both physically, but more so mentally, where a lot of people put themselves through a grind in any work, but especially at that time in, early 2000s through 2009 when I left. It was definitely a stressful time in my life.
Yeah, especially from 2007, 2009 with the financial crisis, all of those things too.
That didn't help. That made it even more of an experience. But again, going through something like that shaped who I am today as a brand builder or investor, because I've seen what happens, what can happen. And, I think I was in college when kind of, the dot-com bubble burst. So I, had some exposure to that, but wasn't in a seat where you actually lived it real life. And you can see the screen where and that was the thing about hedge funds, either made money or you lost money every day and you went home and you became numb to it. But going through an experience like that, where you see the world melting and going through a financial crisis and all the jobs lost and the people's lives that were affected by it, it really sticks with you. And so it taught me two things. One, to understand what risk is and how to kind of look ahead and not just be content with where things are today. But two, it's always darkest before dawn. It will take a moment, but this shall pass and the world will come back and things will come back. And it's hard. And we saw that last year when, the height of COVID, in the spring, when specifically even the stock market had that huge correction and stocks were, it was a 50% retracement and people were fearful. People were losing their lives. People were, quarantining. We've never experienced something like this in 100 years. And so you see the world starting to get back out there. Although this morning, as I was driving here, I saw the shipping containers out on the Pacific waiting to get to port. So
it's like a 3-week delay, isn't it?
Incredible.
Yeah. You're clearly a super capable guy. From a mindset perspective, you've been able to do so much in your career now. What was that tipping point? When was the first time that you felt like you could do anything that you set your mind to, that you were much more capable than you had ever given yourself credit for previously?
I always had a confidence about me, and it wasn't an arrogant confidence. I always thought that, I can just figure this out. And, maybe I didn't push myself in areas where I thought I had no chance whatsoever, right? I mean, I wasn't doing, biochemistry by any means. But in areas that I thought that were challenging, I never doubted myself. And I don't know if it was from when I was a kid playing sports. We will figure it out. Or if something happened in school, or I had a test, okay, I'll figure it out. Like we'll get through it. I always had a belief in myself as long as I can remember that I can make this work. And maybe that's just a mindset of, fooling myself and the confidence. But I think half the way in any challenge is just believing, I think getting halfway through a challenge is just believing that you can actually do it. And getting that mindset. And so I think that's been one thing that's always stuck with me, that since I can remember, I always just believe in myself, and no matter how rocky it got or how many times I failed, I'll figure it out. And most of the time I did in some ways. And
that attribute, I feel like you don't need to know what career you're going to go down, as long because you can learn if you've got that growth mindset and that ability to figure it out, and you've got a very strong opinion of yourself, you will always make the most of whatever situation you're in. And when you are at that point, when the stars align, as it sounded like it did for you with CAVU, then you're able to make the most of it. And it's like everything can happen from there.
Absolutely.
In 2015, you launched CAVU, amazing company. You've done so many cool things ever since, as we mentioned in the intro. What were the origins of that business, and what problem were you trying to solve?
So, I left the hedge fund space in 2009, and I talk about this a lot. My grandfather was a very instrumental part of my life growing up in Ohio, and he told me lots of lessons. And one of them was, if your job's not your passion by the time you're 30, you should quit it immediately. And, as I think back now, it was kind of ironic. He was a bathtub chemist. He invented a car wash products, and he retired very early in life. And so I was like, it's easy for him to say that because he kind of made it as an entrepreneur. And that resonated with me as I found myself sitting in a hedge fund, I think the financial crisis probably helped as well. I think, COVID, speaking in modern day now, I think COVID actually gave people a chance to step back and reflect on, they see what's happened in the world and life and how quickly things can change for the better or for the worse. And I think people have now taken a step back and saying, you know what? I don't want to be doing what I'm doing anymore. I want to go do something that actually spend time, or I can live anywhere I want to now, right? You don't necessarily need to live where your job is. And I want more flexibility, or I want to go on adventures I've never done before, because that got taken away for a while. The ability to be able to travel and do the basic things we took for granted every day. I literally was in a hedge fund, and it wasn't about money. I thought, when you grow up, have money. And what I quickly realized was the price that you pay or the sacrifices you made, at the end of the day, yes, you have a little bit more money in your bank account than I did when I got out of school, but that wasn't happiness. And for me, I wasn't happy. I was lucky that I was able to leave my job. And so I literally went in, gave my 2-week notice. I forgot about the 2-week notice part, so I ended up leaving a week after my 30th birthday, but close enough. And, my wife was pregnant at the time. We were, moving into our first apartment together. And it was a scary, scary time. But again, even then, I was like, it'll work out somehow. And I didn't know how or where or what. But the problem I wanted to solve was I wanted to build something tangible. I want to be a part of a brand. And I think walking through those Kmart's and Targets in the Midwest with my grandfather, and literally we would spend 3 hours going up and down the aisles, admiring different brands and packaging and how packaging draws you in as a consumer. And that if you have beautiful packaging, but the inside is not great, the engine of the car, you're not going to have repeat trial. But if your packaging is great, it will drive trial, and then you'll have consumption if the engine is just as good as the packaging. And how every invention comes from someone's problem. And so that was formative in me. And so I wanted to be involved in consumer. And then as my wife was pregnant at the time, just shortly thereafter, looking at packaging when we were feeding our newborn son and what she was feeding him, making homemade food and looking at the ingredients and the labels and scrutinizing them. And even not only what put in his body, but on his body in terms of shampoos and conditioners. That was my aha moment of there is going to be a massive secular change in how consumers live. And it's not going to be a revolution. It's not happening tomorrow. It's going to be more of an evolution, because you don't change consumer behavior that quickly, especially amongst the different generations. So it was really trying to be healthier. And I changed my lifestyle. I was drinking a Coke a day, and it's 40 grams of sugar and 140 calories. And I switched to Buy. One of the reasons I made one of my first investments in consumer and Buy personally was I started using the product. And I was like, wow, 5 calories, 1 gram of sugar, naturally sweetened, tastes great. I can drink one of these, and it was permissible indulgence. I didn't feel as guilty having some flavor or having a Buy with lunch versus when I drank a Coke, and I felt bad about it.
Yeah, I guess that evolution is much more sustainable as well rather than revolution. We see a lot of those trends come and go in fitness and nutrition, but the evolution of consumer demand and what they actively seek out is interesting because it helps propel all that stuff too. Yep. You are involved in so many amazing businesses and things today. Which ones are you involved in today that excite you the most?
Oh, geez, that's like saying which one's
ranking of your children.
I mean, that's forcing me to rank my children. And
we'll do that for the next question.
Exactly. I enjoy, and again, you my quote that you started it off with, that is so true. And I always kind of want to see what's next and where the world's going, and not where we are today, but where I think the world's going. So I love taking a thematic approach of, okay, what's going on and where's the world going? And then going and doing the homework and the research and talking to people and getting educated, and then making a gut call with some data, because there's not going to be a ton of data, right? If it's a new category that's forming, there's going to be very little data or information about it. But making a call and saying, okay, this is a brand or a category that I think is going to grow. Collagen was a perfect example.
Yeah.
Collagen's been around for ages. And if you looked on Amazon 4 or 5 years ago, it was mostly geared towards geriatrics. Older people who had joint health issues, because there's actually medical science that collagen helps with joint repair and health. And if you looked at all the brands, the packaging and everything was geared towards older people. It was gross packaging. But we start to see, you look at Google search trends and other data, and you start to see more and more people talking about collagen a little bit. And this is 2016. And so we made a bet that, hey, we think collagen is going to be a lot bigger than it is today, tomorrow. We thought it could be as big or bigger than something like whey protein. So it could be a really massive category. And then, and then it's data points. It's going around and saying, okay, what are those data points out there? And I'd go to dinner with my wife and a couple other couples. And 2 of those dinners, the wife of the other couple pulled out a stick pack of Vital Proteins collagen and said, my trainer or my Pilates instructor, told me I should be using this because it's good for my hair, skin, and nails as well. So, now the science on whether it's good for your hair, skin, and nails it's two-sided, right? There's some that say yes, there's some that say no. But even if you believe it's helping, or you see, how do you afford not to take it? So, we went out and looked for the best asset in the category, and we thought Vital Proteins was the category creator. Now, we didn't know if we were going to be right or not. And then you meet the founder, Kurt, an amazing entrepreneur, and you see his vision, and you're like, oh, wow. And so that's what I enjoy the most is going out there, finding something that's not yet discovered, but has a few data points that you can kind of base your thesis on, and
you can see it coming through at a grassroots level and simmering below the surface. Yeah. Yep. Incredible things that you've worked on. With these, it's hard in these consumer packaged brands. I'm obviously not involved in that space. In places like technology where you can control algorithms and different things, it's easy to create some type of economic moat. Like, why aren't there more companies that see the success of like Once Upon a Farm, which is just super clean ingredients in a pouch, and try and replicate that?
Why haven't more done it?
Yeah, like how do you build an economic moat around obviously timing is a big one, but how do you build an economic moat to stop competition from coming in and basically replicating that using some competitive advantage that they might have to...
It's hard. You really can't. You see, in the old days, it used to be big advertising budgets. So if you want to create a brand, you have a multi-million dollar marketing advertising budget, and you would go to Madison Avenue marketing firms that would put you on TV or radio or print. And a lot of challenger, new and upcoming brands really couldn't afford to do that. And I think with the emergence of social media and reviews and direct to consumer and Amazon, a mom in Chicago can talk about her experience with the Once Upon a Farm platform about giving it to her babies and their children, where someone maybe living in the middle of the country hadn't heard of it, but because he follows that person on Facebook or whatever media outlet there is, that's like grassroots marketing. You don't have to pay for that. Now, yes, you can. There's digital advertising and all these things and acquiring customers. So the hard part about consumer is, in a lot of ways, there's not a moat.
Yeah.
Your moat is basically being a category creator, so fast mover or the fast follower, right? I think there's one or two, and my belief is, you don't want to be investing in the 19th kombucha coming to market, right? It's too hard. There's too much competition for shelf space. It usually what happens in categories get popular, and collagen's the same way. Price keeps going down and down. And I give Kurt a lot of credit for the founder of Vital Proteins, because he went and built his own manufacturing early on, so that he saw that, hey, listen, this category's going to get big. There's going to be price promotion, lowering prices. But because he has his own manufacturing, he ultimately has higher gross margins than all the other competitors that are independent startups. Other people are using co-manufacturers. And so he has the ability to actually lower prices and have still a pretty healthy margin and have a sustainable business. So, and the thing, so category creator, fast follower would be the first part. Then it's brand and team. And I put team as like execution. And then anyone can come in. And so I think that that first mover advantage is real, because if you're in a category and you're the first mover, it's just such an advantage. You've made some mistakes earlier on. You're able to get that shelf space. People, when they think of collagen, like, at least, and I use the example again, most people say, oh, Vital Proteins. Now, I saw on TV the other day, there was a Dasani water has collagen in it now. So you think about how far this has come in 4 or 5 years. It's
Dasani's owned by Coke, isn't it?
Right. And so it's just like, wow, okay, so there's something there when you're seeing those commercials on TV. But consumer is very hard. It's Adult Swim. It's all the kids out of the pool and time for the grown-ups to swim their laps at rest period, right? It is a very hard industry, but if you've got something differentiated, I think it's easier now than ever to start a brand, because you don't have to have there's not the barriers to entry are a lot less, and which makes it more accessible for anyone anywhere in the world to launch a brand if they have a passion for it or they think they have a good idea.
You touched on being one of the first entrants in a category there. What else is part of your investment criteria when you're looking at being involved in some amazing emerging brands?
I think finding a category creator is something different, right? So something that's unique. And listen, we may not always get it right. We think a brand's a category creator and it really isn't, or we picked the wrong one. I think the founder.
The jockey, not the horse.
Yeah, and the horse has to be pretty strong and in a very fit horse. But you choose the founder, even with a horse that's a little bit, less. And it's funny, pattern recognition becomes real. And so where I thought I was a good investor back in 2008, 2009, and then, when I started investing in consumer privates was, 2010, call it. So before I started CAVU, before I took other people's money, I wanted to make sure that I did a lot of my learning and mistakes on my own money. And I didn't feel comfortable yet or confident enough in terms of, okay, I'm ready. And it wasn't until 2015. And I had help. I brought, an industry veteran like Rohan Oza into the mix early on, which was crucial because he had been in the industry. He worked at Mars and Coca-Cola. So he did big CPG, but then he worked at entrepreneurial brand like Vitamin Water and helped build that, and then helped on Vita Coco and Pop Chips and Buy. So that was invaluable in terms of helping kind of get up that learning curve quicker. But pattern recognition is real. And I can't tell you how many founders I've met since I started doing this. It's probably the best part of my job is sitting across from a founder and hearing their passion, seeing it, painting the vision, and then watching this and being a part of that journey. And, it's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow as all of them kind of seek out saying, yes, I'm going to make a lot of money here. It is that journey, and it sounds cheesy and cliche. But when you think back, and I was just with Kurt from Vital Proteins the other day, and we were talking about how fun that journey was and how there are good days and bad days and stresses and, oh my gosh, how are we going to figure this out? So as you look back, that's it. But it's founder. And now you're not always going to get it right, but that founder, it has to be, or founding team has to be passionate. You can tell, like, how do they solve a problem? Can they build a team? Can they be leaders? And when I've sat in enough rooms now with people where I'm like, okay, this person is someone that I think will figure it out.
We'll be back with the show shortly. Before we do, I've got a quick question for you. How would your life change if you had me and a handpicked team of high-level entrepreneurs working with you for not 1 month, not 2 months, but 3 months to take your business and brand to the next level? That's right, this February, I'm hosting my signature program, the Day One Mastermind, to help entrepreneurs like you 10x your income, influence, and impact. If you run your own business or are thinking about starting your own business, this will change your life like nothing else. I'll be sharing the exact secrets that have got me featured on more than 600 podcast, radio, and television shows, published in more than 10 languages, and connected with some of the most influential individuals and companies on the planet. Above all, I'll be showing you how to crack the code to scaling your income without scaling your workload. If you want to learn more about the Day One Mastermind and to hear from some of the people who have joined previously, go to thedayone.com, or click the link in the show notes. And I mentioned a handpicked team of high-level entrepreneurs, but who are they, I hear you ask? These are people like Janine Shepherd, who'll be showing you how she's amassed almost 1 billion views online. She'll also be working with you to personally book, deliver, and leverage a TED Talk of your own. There's Josh Henry Hicks, who has facilitated almost $1 billion in ad spend, helped more than 40 brands get acquired or raise their next round of funding, and worked with some of the most successful disruptor brands in the world. Josh will be showing you how to sell, scale, and stand out on social media. That's just 2 of the special guests, and we've got a bunch more waiting to help you, and their mission is simple: to help you 10x your income, influence, and impact. There's more than $100,000 in value throughout this mastermind, plus some epic bonuses, not to mention unlimited access to me personally for 3 months. You'll even get a chance to be interviewed on my top-rated Win the Day podcast. That's right, the show you're listening to right now, and given a bunch of assets that you can use to grow your brand. And if there's one thing you should know about me, it's that I love going above and beyond. We're even throwing in a special one-on-one game plan session, just you and me, this December, to make sure you can build some momentum before the mastermind officially begins in February and start getting you some big results as soon as possible. So if you're ready to take your business and brand to the next level and want to join my inner circle, there's no better way. Go to thedayone.com or click the link in the show notes. But you better be quick because there's only 12 spots available and applications are closing very soon. One more thing, that I mentioned the results are guaranteed. That's right, results are guaranteed. For every single person who participates, I personally guarantee massive results, or you can choose to have a full refund, or I'll work with you one-on-one for free until you do. The choice is yours. You won't find a better guarantee than that anywhere on the planet, and you'd never experience growth like you'll experience in the Day One Mastermind. Again, only 12 spots are available and applications are closing soon. Relationships have made all the difference in my life, and I'm excited to give you an express path to achieving everything you want. Go to thedayone.com or click the link in the show notes. You'll be asked a few questions to make sure you're a good fit for the group, and we'll go from there. All right, let's get back into the show. You mentioned vitamin water there. Obviously, celebrity endorsements there. 50 Cent was involved in that one. I think it was Jennifer Aniston was involved in the Smart Water one as well. How come with so many celebrity endorsements, some brands really take off having a celebrity endorser at the helm and others completely, it seems to have no impact whatsoever with the evolution of the business?
A couple of things. One, I think the consumer is a lot smarter. You know, it used to be that you could take Michael Jordan and put him holding a Big Mac, and people are like, I want to go have a McDonald's Big Mac because Michael Jordan eats it. I think this generation, I think millennials, Gen Z, I think they're a lot smarter. They read a lot more. I think they don't see that as authentic as it, maybe in the days when we were growing up. And I think from that perspective, it's got to be more authentic. And so I think it has to really work with the story. And I think 50 Cent worked with vitamin water because, that changed the whole equity play, right? It was celebrities were always with products, but they're getting paid cash. And it's funny, Rohan always jokes, like, they say, wow, that was game changing, like revolutionary partnership, 50 Cent having his own, flavor at the time. And he's like, it wasn't because I was anything revolutionary. It's like, we just didn't have the money to pay him cash, right? He wanted cash. We had to give him equity because we didn't have money. And so it was almost, a necessity they had to do that. But I think it has to do with the celebrity too, whoever that might be. Like, if you bring them in too early, you don't want to be known as that celebrity's brand only. And I think a brand has to exist on its own without a celebrity early on. Now, obviously, there's examples where it works day one with a celebrity. For the most part, I feel like it feels forced. It feels inauthentic. And also, is that celebrity authentic in the sense, like, if you bring a celebrity into a pet brand, do they even own a pet? Are they passionate about pets? Have they been known about being a pet lover for years? Like, that adds to it, where it just feels like, oh, you're putting a well-known face on this brand to try to, like, accelerate it. Yeah. So, and I think the consumer is way too smart these days. I feel
like you can see that with pets and kids more than anything. Like that authenticity there.
And I think and the new celebrity is the influencer is the new celebrity. Yeah. Nano micro influencers, the moms who are, or the dads who are cooking a recipe, with a product like, a kettle on fire or whatever it might be, those are the new influencers because they have a following. And then it's these mini infernos that get started across the country.
Yeah. You do a lot of work in-house. You try to add a lot of value to these brands and things that you work with. Is there a particular success story or transformation that you've had with the brand that really stands out or that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I think two come to mind, but I think there's a brand called One Brands. And it's funny, I never had heard of the brand. And the pre-existing brand was called Oh Yeah Nutrition, and it had been around for literally 20 years. And, had decent success, but hadn't, it was kind of like stalled a little bit, but a little bit of profit, making okay money. And then the founder, Ron, created a product that, he saw Quest, which became extremely popular and had incredible growth. And he didn't like the taste. He thought there could be a better way to deliver the protein with less sugar than what was being available. And so he created one. And Rohan and I remember sitting next to him. We tried it for the first time. And we both looked at each other. And he said, this is the buy of candy bars, of protein bars. Because it tasted like a candy bar. And it was 20 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar.
Yeah, so cleaner ingredients, better taste.
Exactly.
Match made in heaven.
Exactly. But the problem, I used the car analogy earlier on packaging. The packaging was horrible. It was horrendous. But the engine was a Ferrari engine. And so, we love that opportunity because One Bar got pretty successful very quickly with the packaging working against it, not helping it. So in our mind, we're like, oh my gosh, this is easy. We can fix this packaging, like start activating it. But, you always have to have a conversation with the founder and make sure you're aligned before you go into a deal. It's a partnership. It's a marriage. And you want to have those conversations and be honest and open and transparent where we told him, Ron, your packaging sucks. And but we're
Is this
very
before the
direct in
check-in
us.
inside?
Yes, before, because we want to make sure that and listen, change is hard. And he'd been doing something for 20 years the same way. To come in and say, hey, we love your baby, but it could be a little prettier.
Yeah.
That tells a lot of how an entrepreneur responds to that, because, I give him credit. Not
Good
only
test.
was he willing to change that packaging, but he also was able to be honest with what his skill sets were and weren't.
Yeah.
And I think great founders understand when their skill sets, what their strengths and what their weaknesses are. And I have strengths and I have a lot of weaknesses. And so it's trying to put yourself in a position to succeed, focusing on your strengths and not letting your weaknesses hurt you. And, a lot of founders can say they want to be rich or you want to be famous. And I give Ron a ton of credit because, we said before we went in, listen, we'd like to bring in a team and expand the team. We'd like to bring in someone to run the day to day. And because he was amazing at innovation, he could create bars that were so great tasting. And so we brought in a management team, Peter Burns, an amazing operator in the CPG category, along with a lot of some of the team that he'd worked with previously at Justin's. And listen, that brand went like that because of those changes. And so we did that packaging in-house. I give Stevie, we have an agency internally called Uncommon, and it does packaging work, design work, billboard campaigns, social digital influencing, DTC Amazon work. And I give Stevie Clements and her team a lot of credit for recreating that package in-house and doing it. So
I guess now that you've got the runs on the board as far as the shifts in packaging that you've been able to create and the explosive growth those brands have experienced as a result, any founder who doesn't recognize your expertise in that, it's probably a bit of a failed test from their perspective. It's that you are not aligned on vision and they're thus not a good fit for that partnership. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Listen, I always love, when you're in talking about a partnership and, listen, that's the most, outside of their family, it's the most important thing to them. It's their baby. And you're talking about equity percentages and ownerships and all these terms and how's life going to change. And I think you learn a lot about a person during a negotiation or a conversation about how is this going to work? And I think I think one of my strengths is that, and you don't always get it right. I've made mistakes and you learn from it. But I think one of the strengths is trying to listen and hear what the entrepreneur, what's important to them. And then conversely, also understanding what's important to us and seeing if that's a match. And if it's a match, fantastic. And you're not always going to see eye to eye. And our way we work with brands is we want to kind of say, this is kind of how we feel like we would work together and make sure we get alignment. And then during the journey, all we want to do is push the thinking. It's still their baby. We're minority investors. So we don't have, the final say necessarily. So it really comes down to building trust between both sides as the foundation of the partnership so that you can have direct, honest conversations. And all it is to push the thinking of the entrepreneur to, give them another point of view don't forget, we've had a lot of landmines and a lot of failures and a lot of mistakes. So if we can help, and that was the whole idea of CAVU, right? CAVU stands for Ceiling and Visibility Unlimited. It's a pilot's term. It's the perfect flying condition. So our whole hope with that metaphor is that we can help make that journey a little smoother, like clear skies. And we've learned a lot from mistakes. And so if we can impart some of that, avoid a landmine or two to these founders, like we want to pass that on. But we come with the perspective of we want to help them. This is our opinion, but it's your show. This is your baby. You're driving, you have the keys to the car, but that's how we would see it. And they digest that. And they end up making a decision because they have better information and they've gotten other opinions from people. Yeah,
much better foundation for that relationship. You retain the DNA of what makes a brand great. We've mentioned packaging, we've mentioned founders and things. Yep. What other characteristics make a good brand for those who want to turn their concept into eventually a household brand?
I think you have to be solving a problem. I feel like where I've made mistakes in investing in brands is when there was just kind of a Me Too type of product and it wasn't a category creator. It has to solve a problem and it also has to draw an emotional connection with the consumer. You need to have that consumer become brand evangelists. There's a shoe company that just went public called On Running, and we're not investors and we're investors in On, but and I use that example because I use the products and the people, it wasn't a very well-known brand, but the people who know the brand were enthusiasts where they own like 6-7 pairs of the shoes. And I found I was that consumer. I kept every new style that came out, like I wanted to buy them. So I feel like you have to have an emotional connection with the consumer in some way, whether it's the packaging, whether it's the mission, the problem you're solving, the founder story. It's got to be authentic. Brands that feel like they were made in a lab don't draw that emotional connection. But the founders that are actually trying to solve a problem because they had a personal experience themselves, and that's the reason for why they created this. And this goes back to what my grandfather always told me, right? Every good invention comes from someone's problem. So having a founder that has experienced this problem and wants to go and set up and trying to solve it, I think there's no like secret, well, you have these two things and it's a go. It really is trying to see kind of that pattern recognition of those 4 or 5 combination things. And if a brand checks a lot of those, then I think that's something that we usually get excited about.
So the emotional connection, when you look at any type of package and it's like 50 years ago, Mary, our grandma, was making this in a kitchen. Yeah. Is that exactly what they're doing? They're trying to make that emotional connection?
I think so. It's authentic. And it's and I think
I feel like Siete does that really well.
Yes. Siete is an incredible brand, right? It was the family and the story. If you read first of all, the product is really good. You always have to have a good product, right? Or you're not going to have trial or repeat business. But if you turn over that bag of chips and you see the picture of the family from 20 years ago and all 7 of them, and then they tell the story about the recipe, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you're rooting for their success.
You're rooting for it, and they have good products. Yeah. The packaging is catchy. The name stands for something. Yeah. That's exactly right. Good call out. And again, the fact that I've turned that over and we can actually, and you mentioned that brand, and I've actually read the whole back of that envelope. That's exactly right.
Yeah, they've done a good job.
Yeah.
Amazing. Would you ever double dip in the same category if it's something you're super excited about or really bullish about it?
Probably not. When we invested in kombucha, we had an opportunity to invest when the kind of market started to change a little bit, where alcoholic kombucha came out, right? It was saying, okay, functional soda now is out. There should be functional alcohol. But we were still investors in Health Aid. And so now, like, we wouldn't invest in 2 things like that. There's been a situation where we had Vital Proteins, which is pure play collagen, and then Bulletproof has some collagen. So that was something where we had to call, both founders to make sure, hey, are you okay with this? And if they weren't okay with it, then we wouldn't have done it. We want to be doing this for the next 20, 30, 40 years. I want to build an institution. I want people if they're a food and beverage entrepreneur, it's like in tech when you have Sequoia, and every tech founder wants Sequoia and Andreessen on their cap table. I think in food and beverage, like, we want to be one of those couple firms that people seek out. And as we go into other categories, in pet and human performance and personal care and beauty, that's our aspiration, right? That's our BHAG, right? Is trying to be, when an entrepreneur is starting a company, that they want to reach out and talk to us. And in 6 years, that's already started to happen in some categories. But we because of that, we don't want to double dip. And if there's ever a little overlap, right, we make sure that, we have that conversation. But it's hard, because if you believe in a category, I think there can be more than one winner. But then if they're sitting next to each other, you can't do that. And a perfect example would be, we're a brand of ours called Poppy. And Poppy was a brand Rohan, actually, my partner, found on Shark Tank. And it was called Mother. And we partnered with them. We changed the packaging from a bottle to a can. We changed the name, came up with Poppy, and then we did the packaging in-house, the Uncommon agency. And, this brand launched, and, last year is Poppy, and it's honestly the fastest growing beverage brand we've ever been a part of. And, there was other category brands forming there, and Olipop and Culture Pop and Health Aid even has launched one. So we've had opportunities to look, and we won't do it. It's good sign seeing competition, because, if you're the only brand in a category, you're going to start to look around and be like, well, why am I so lucky? Right? Or what am I missing?
What am I missing?
Right. And I think with a brand with Poppy, like, we actually like seeing competition come in, because it's validating a category. It's not just the absence of bad, it's the presence of good now as well. And so if you can offer something, a probiotic, a functional soda with 40 grams of sugar instead of 40, 20, 25 calories that tastes good, there's a category there. And I think this could be the new pop, the new soda, and the millennial, the Gen Z soda. And I get, 14-year-olds who will write me asking for Poppy swag because they love the brand. And that's pretty cool that a brand is reaching, 14 years old, but also I drink it.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Big range, micro influencers. You better get some swag.
Exactly.
I saw that Nancy's now as well is doing probiotic, which I often see next to Good Culture in the supermarkets and things. It looks like they're going all in on that probiotic thing. It's amazing to watch these trends that they can just take off so fast.
Gut health. It's. I don't think there was a lot of, we're still living with the old school food pyramid. That food pyramid should be inverted. And, I think it's hard because what we've been told to drink, and even milk, right? Look at the milk campaign. When I was growing up, I had milk at my table every single meal. My kids, don't really have milk. And it's just incredible, like what a marketing campaign can do for a brand where it helps your bones, it helps you be taller. I'm 6'5", and people always ask, well, how are you so tall? My mom's, because he drank milk. It's like, well, actually, Mom, no, it's not true. That's a marketing campaign that convinced you that was true, right?
Confirmation bias.
Exactly. So
we like to keep it pretty real on this show from a mental health perspective. Is there a particularly dark day that stands out, a particularly challenging day on this journey that you've had on the entrepreneurial side?
Listen, I think there's been a ton, and I think that is you have to expect that. And, being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. And, it's why, I have a lot of friends that are extremely smart, extremely successful, and they still have their 9 to 5. And it's wow, if this person were to leave and go on their own, imagine the world of possibilities. And the thing is, not everyone's wired like that. I left a very good job when I was 30 because I didn't see the downside. And I did have fear. Maybe it was peak earnings at 25 and 28. And I was like, I don't know if I'll ever make this much money. And I didn't care about that because I want to follow my passion and what I love to do. And so, I think there's been a ton of dark days. It's, you always move with a fast pace with purpose. And I always go back to the Stephen Schwartzman book where he talks about if he hadn't moved with such purpose and intensity and time kills deals and all those, analogies, they talked about how they closed their first fund, Blackstone, on a Friday. And that following Monday was Black Monday for the stock. And he's like, who knows if Blackstone, we would probably not have been able to raise our fund. And you think about a weekend difference about moving forward. And so it's not for everybody. But for the people who have made that leap, you just have to not let the lows get too low, the highs too high, and you got to stay as balanced as possible. And it's okay. You have a bad day or bad news. It's okay to wallow in it for a little bit and feel sorry for yourself. But, whenever I failed in life, I kind of allowed myself, okay, one day of feeling bad for myself or why me and, how can this happen? And the next day it was, okay, let's roll up the sleeves. Let's go chop wood. Let's get back into it and try to figure it out. And I think that's a mindset that people can either, and it's growth, it's learning. Failure, it's interesting. We were told, I was told, you can't fail. Like, you got to keep practicing. Practice makes perfect. No, practice makes progress. And my kids tell me that because I will say on the basketball court when they're practicing, hey, practice makes perfect. And I'm like, oh no. And they were like, they correct me. And I love that because people put too much pressure on themselves on every single little move. I get it. The stakes are high. You probably have left your job. It could be paycheck to paycheck. It's painful.
Practice makes progress. I love that. I think that's really cool.
I came from my children, which tells you how things have changed from when we were growing up, and it seemed more like be perfect, be perfect, be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a couple of times today, every good invention comes from someone's problem. Yep. For someone who has what they think is a great business idea, what's the best way for them to stress test that so they can hopefully build a sustainable business?
I think you have to get feedback, and you can't just get feedback from the people that love you. You actually have to put yourself out there and try to, it's like beverage. We say liquid to lips. If you believe you have an amazing liquid, you got to get in people's hands, because once they try it, if it's a good product, then their consumption will continue. So I think being honest with yourself and, everyone's taste preferences, everyone's view, that's what makes humans amazing, because everyone's different. And so not just drinking the Kool-Aid of this is amazing, but actually going out and putting yourself out there and taking feedback from a sample set of all different people. I think that's very healthy. I think, and also, we live in LA, and it's la la land, right? And some things that are very practical and everyday common here may not be applicable to other markets, even on the other coasts. So you have to put yourself out and saying, okay, is this a product for people who live in a bubble, or is this something that is actually like mainstreamable, and more people will realize that either this product is good or they need this product. They didn't know they needed it. And so I think just having feedback and being willing to go out there but not only just get the feedback, actually listen to it. And that's the hard part, because you may not get back what you think you're going to get back. And then what do you do with that information?
Yeah, like a $20 LA cold pressed juice mightn't work as well in other parts of the country.
There you go, right? And that's the hard part. And part of the reason I moved to LA was, yes, better lifestyle for my family, and so my kids didn't have to grow up throwing the baseball on the sidewalk. But also because I found myself on a plane coming out here 14, 15 times a year. Yeah. And the hard part is finding a brand out here, because a lot of them will start out here. Which ones can transform across the country?
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's now move to the Win the Day Rocket Round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You ready for this one, Brett?
Yes, I am.
Number one, what quote inspires you the most? Would it be the Wayne Gretzky quote from earlier, or is there a different one?
Yeah, I know it's boring and cliche. I think I don't know if it necessarily inspires me. I think it guides me more than anything, that as I'm looking as an investor, I don't want to be stagnant. I want to be looking forward. I also think, I'll jumble the quote a little bit here, but it's something. The only things you will regret in life are the chances you didn't take. Yeah. And I think failure is okay. Like, it's good to fail. The things I regret the most in my life are when I didn't take that chance. Okay. And I still think about those to this day. If I put myself out there, you'll never know. Yeah. And so having no regrets is how I try to live my life. And if there's something I want to do it, because if you want to do it in the moment and you don't, you're probably going to regret it. And those are the things 5, 10, 15, 20 years later that you still remember is the regrets. You remember the failures, but you wonder what if, and it's the worst feeling in the world to wonder what if.
Have you heard of that quote that says, when I die, my greatest fear is that when I die, the person I am meets the person I could have become?
There you go. You said it much more eloquently than I did. But yes, that will be my quote.
It's scary, isn't it, when you hear that one? It's like, oh, better take the shots when we get them.
Absolutely.
Number 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
I came in with a morning matcha. So again, talking about being in LA now and adjusting to, 4 or 5 years ago, matcha wasn't really around that much. Now you see Nike has a matcha color. Morning matcha would be my answer.
Love it. Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Ooh. I think slow down. There's that old Ferris Bueller quote that dates, I'm dating myself here, but a very popular movie back in the late 80s. But it said, you have to take a moment and stop, or you'll miss life, right? And I think my mindset had always been, okay, what's next? What's next? And you have to enjoy those moments. And don't worry about what college you're going to go to or what career you're going to have. Live in the present and learn to enjoy and be present more, and kind of love where you are at right now. And that would be my biggest thing, is be more present and enjoy life, and don't think about tomorrow. Just when something good happens, celebrate it, enjoy it, be proud of yourself. Because I think in life, it just goes so fast. You got to stop and enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah, so true. Number 4, what book do you gift the most?
Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Yeah. I don't know. I just think, I think his story is inspirational. If you see he was overweight previously and how he just changed his mindset and said, I need to get healthier, and Navy SEAL. And it's an incredible story. And, when I watch his videos, obviously I can't play him in front of my children from the language perspective, but he is pretty inspirational, and he motivates. He's a very good motivator. And so I've given that book out. I've enjoyed it. And I've read it 3 times now. So I don't know. It's a fun, light book that kind of, inspires you in the moment.
Yeah, legit badass.
Yep.
Number 5, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
I was always the tallest kid in my class. I was a very good athlete growing up, probably because I was tall. So I kind of didn't like attention, and I was, I think that made me hide a little bit how I dressed. I wanted to avoid that, because everyone would come up to me, oh, you're a good athlete, or, oh, you're so tall, do you play basketball? It was constant. I always stood out. I always had to, stand at the back of the picture instead of the front. And I think having that humility, that humbleness, as life has gone, either failures or success, I think I've maintained that. And I think I think that is a superpower, because I think as people get older in life and maybe find more success, I think they change. And I think growing up in the Midwest, and because I was a little was very self-aware and also self-conscious. I felt different. I think that enabled me to be humble and compassionate and empathetic as I've gone on and done more things in my life.
Yeah, you can still see these values. Those values are still connected to everything you're doing from family and business and stuff today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 6, you've touched on this a lot. What's one thing you've learned about failure?
Oh, gosh.
Separate episode for that one.
To embrace it.
Yeah.
It's okay. And it's going to happen. And, it's always darkest before dawn. It will pass. Learn from it, and you'll figure it out. I don't think you can succeed without failing. And I failed multiple times in my life. And I do remember one vividly, where I was back in the office the next day saying, okay, I talked about earlier, I'm going to figure this out. I didn't know how I was going to figure it out. I mean, when I went to work that day, I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to solve this, but I'm going to go sit at my desk. I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I already did that the night before. Okay, let's just start getting in motion. Objects in motion kind of stay in motion. So even if it's something small, but embrace it. It's part of any journey. Any successful entrepreneur or company you've seen has had hundreds of failures and problems and issues, and it only makes you stronger.
Yeah, they're not seen in the highlights reel, are they? All the behind the scenes stuff.
Everyone talks about their wins and some of the brands you mentioned, but we've had a lot of failures too. And guess what? You learn more from those than you do from your wins.
Yeah, very true. Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
That's easy. That's my grandfather. He gave me such wisdom at such an early age. I'm a kid, so I think half the stuff probably went in one ear out the other. So I kind of want to go back and sit on that bench, and now that I'm older, and get the parts that I missed, because the parts that I did get are still very ingrained in me. Yeah.
When the student is ready, the master will appear type stuff.
There you go.
Yeah. Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
Wow. Honestly, it's being part of a team, and it's fine. I've played team sports. I've played individual sports like tennis. So part of the reason it attracted me to tennis was it was all you. If you won, it was because you beat the other opponent. If you lost, well, you weren't that great that day, or he or she was just better than you. And I think the tool or resource, I think it's just knowing that you can't all do it by yourself, and to realize what your strengths and weaknesses are. Try to focus on your strengths, but then also don't let your weaknesses be, kind of an anchor on your growth. And so surrounding yourself with great people and people who are smarter than you. Now, you don't always find it in terms of, it's hard to hire, right? You never know until someone starts. But trying to hire people that are smarter than you is something I always try to do. And then also being able to let them run with it. You want to hire good, smart people, and you don't want to be telling them what to do. You want to be asking more questions of, hey, and they'll figure out how to do it, right? And I think that's the biggest growing up I've done, is saying, okay, it can't just be you on an island. You've got to be open to letting other people help. And I think that's been the biggest tool resource that's really helped us.
Speaking of islands, what's one thing on your bucket list?
I'm from Cleveland. I'm passionate about my home. I would love one day to, even if it was one tiny share, to have a piece of ownership in it was the Cleveland Guardians, the Cleveland Indians. Now it's the Cleveland Guardians. Baseball, that's my everything. I mean, I actually still watch baseball on TV. Many people don't, and the games is long. And I think for the younger generations, it's too long. But that is, as I was growing up, that was when things were tough. It's funny, something like a sports team. And we talked about how in Rust Belt states, how sports are such a fabric of, your emotional and your development and your society and your community. But yeah, that would be on my bucket list one day.
Yeah, in Australia, cricket games can go for 5 days. So
man, you can watch baseball. You're a pro at that. Then. That's crazy.
And final question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
I work out every single morning before the day starts. So I usually work out at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. It's just getting the endorphins, releasing stress. You start with a workout or a run or a walk, and that kind of sets the tone for your day, where you've already knocked that out. Everything else is you've got momentum behind it. You're back in to kind of ease in through the day.
Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Brett and his business, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can check out their website, CAVUVentures.com, follow them on Instagram at CAVU Ventures, and connect with them on both Twitter and LinkedIn. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Brett, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Brett. Again, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So if there's a friend or loved one who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day, share it with them right now. And if you enjoyed the episode, hit that subscribe button and also leave a comment to let us know what your favorite takeaway was from this episode. That's all for today. Remember to get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.